about it?
So Billy,
we had a brief technical glitch, but we are back, and we're talking about how we are going to where we're going to find the money to pay the teachers, and maybe at least get back to the national median, which is where we were before the recession.
And I think that's the goal, Tim, is to get back to the national median. When we look at the, what we did this year, 6.4% average pay increase this year, I think we need to do that twice more during the next 2 budget cycles, and that will get us a little bit above the national median, even if we're chasing the numbers into the future. I understand Billy's desire to get us into the top 5 for teacher pay, or top 5 in the nation, but the fact is that the average household income in North Carolina ranks 41st in the nation, and the cost of living is 35th. So if we get up in around the 25, 24, top 25 in the nation on teacher pay, we'll actually be doing very well, and I think we can get ourselves to the point where we're the leaders in education, because teachers will come here for that disparity, that advantage. If you look around the country, there aren't any states that have a disparity that would, top 5 teacher pay in this state, we'd have to be paying $74,000 a year in teacher pay, which would be a premium over average household income, about 50%. There's no state in the country that does that. 20% disparity, one way or the other, is as far as it goes. And so I think we have to be reasonable about it. I think you can promise lots of things, and you can say, well, we need to be the very top and pay our teachers the best, but the truth is that we have to look at the numbers and understand what's reasonable.
Billy, you were shaking your head.
Yeah, that's almost un-American, mediocre. To me, we're Americans, we're North Carolinians. We believe in being the best. And one of the things we have to do as public servants, and should do, is encourage and set goals. And the great leaders we've had, like Ronald Reagan and John Kennedy, they didn't mince words. They said, let's go. Let's embrace this change. Let's embrace what's before us, and let's fix it. And they did. And that's what we're not doing today. We don't need to be mediocre. We need to be excellent. And the way you do that is, yes, you sacrifice some. But you sacrifice for your children and for your future. We have been so blessed in this country. We cannot afford not to pass that on. And the way you pass it on is you invest in the future. And it's really easy. It's not as hard as people think. All we have to do is go back to the 2014-2015 tax base. Keep discipline on the rest of the spending. But if we went back to that tax level, 2014-2015, we could pay for this over 3 years.
I think there's another approach, quite frankly. The year-over-year figures indicate in this state wages for the average household in this state are up 5.3%. That's a result of a good economy, an economy that's drawing good jobs and businesses here. We have to grow from the bottom. You can't start paying more up here until you're raising the income of those who are paying the taxes. You know that 54% of the revenue that goes into our teacher pay or into our state budget comes from individual income taxes, and 36% of it comes from sales and use taxes. You're asking average, everyday North Carolinians, so we've got to raise their pay, float their boat higher. We can float everyone's boat higher. But in addition to that, we have some catching up to do, and I don't disagree with that. My husband taught out at Fayetteville High School for 20 years. We know a lot of the teachers. We understand the challenges. And yes, he sometimes did have a second job while he was doing that because he was teaching over at FTCC as well. And that's not unusual, and I understand that. And they're long hours and it's hard work. And we have to treat our teachers as valued professionals that they are.
If I may, teacher pay is an important issue here in the state.
And I'm not just talking about teacher pay.
But is that really the primary issue that was going to ensure that kids across the whole state, rural schools, poor schools, rich schools, are going to be able to succeed, or is it going to take more than just putting more money into teacher salaries in the state?
I think it takes more, but I think teacher pay is important because that's how we recruit teachers to come to our state, right? That's a challenge that we have right now, so I think it makes a difference. But we also have, I don't think we can undervalue, what we have in our public education system in this state. All 3 of our children went to public school here in Cumberland County Schools, K through 12, and attended North Carolina universities. They had wonderful education, went on to get advanced degrees at major universities. We should not discount the fact that we do have a good education system here, but we have to address the disparities. The problem is that when you're talking about the disparities in education, outcomes in particular, but we're talking opportunity as well. It's often dependent on the neighborhood and the zip code where you live. And that's what Leandro was all about. How do we level the playing field?
Well, yeah, I would point out that your kids grew up in a two-parent, middle-class
That's
household where learning was valued.
Exactly.
And so, and every study in the world is going to show that is going to produce some of the best students, the best prepared students. But what do we do about the kids who don't have that advantage going in?
And again, this is not just about teacher pay. I hope the listeners will look up House Bill 888 because I spent 4 months researching and doing this, and it's a comprehensive. One of the things we do in the General Assembly is a problem comes up in education, such as, for example, preschool, and we'll work on preschool. But we don't ever look at it globally. And what I attempted to do in that bill was bring all the studies that were done and all the things that most people agree on. For example, fully funding the three-year-old preschool, the mentor program, those type programs at work, the fellows, reinstate the fellows program. Why we did away with the most successful teaching recruiting tool is beyond me. Vice President Pence came down from Indiana with a group, was so impressed with our fellows program, he took it up to Indiana and enacted it. But yet we in North Carolina, because one party happened to push the idea, the other party being in control says, no, we're not doing that anymore. That's what's killing us, that type of thing. And we have got to look at this globally and really fix it. To sit there and say that it was good, education was much better 10 years ago than it is now.
Absolutely.
We are slipping, and we're slipping in a time where information and knowledge is at a premium, and we cannot let that happen. It is essential that we give this gift to our children. The great equalizer in this country has been for years and years and years, education. It is going to be at a premium in the next 20, 30, 40 years. And we have got to ensure that these children have that opportunity.
One question that's come from one of our viewers, Mike wants to know about the education lottery money. A lot of money has come into the state coffers in the more than 10 years since we started the lottery.
More than that.
Why are we? Where has that money been going, and why is that not part of this discussion on raising salaries on teachers?
As many of us predicted, the lottery money ended up being replacement money largely. It replaced other money in the budget. It really didn't add to the total pile of money that was available for education. A lot of us saw that coming. It happened. It was an unfortunate adventure, I think, because a lot of people refer to the lottery as a tax on the poor. We know that disproportionately those people who invest in lottery tickets are people who can least afford it because they want an opportunity. They think that's the way out. I think that we're doing much better investing in terms of leveling the playing field for those who come from families that have less advantages and they have less parental attention on the children and the family. I mean, that's another issue we have to address is families for sure. I really feel that understanding that is part of the solution for all of this. But I really truly believe the opportunity scholarships are part of the answer. It allows any family to make a choice to get their child out of the zip code, to allow them to have an education in another setting. And that's what we have to do for those parents who are interested. For those parents who are not interested, who aren't going to be involved in their child's education, we cannot have a child in school enough days, hours of the day, days of the week, or weeks of the year to make up for what they don't get at home. And that's a sad fact, but that's just the case.
Billy, I saw you shaking your head again, so let me give you a second to comment on that, and then I want to move on to another topic.
Well, resources are so precious and the studies are showing that the folks that opt out and go in the opportunity scholarship, the academic achievement is not improving. And that we have done a very poor job of holding accountable that money, in terms of seeing if it's doing what it's intended to do. We're not auditing it, and there are some schools that are clearly abusing it. So we've got to, you know, if we're going to continue down this road, we've got to tighten it up, and we've got to hold it to the same accountable standards that we do our public schools. I personally am open to anything that's going to help a child succeed, and I mean that sincerely. I think we're at a point in time in this world where if we don't stop owning ideas and start listening to other people, we're going to get further down the road, slipping down the hill. It's only when we listen to each other, and it's only when we try to consider the ideas of both that we'll grow. And we have got to do that. I just can't stress enough what I'm seeing is out there in terms of the world and how it's just catching up with us, and how we are not striving for excellence anymore. And we need to do that, and we need to hold that up. And I think one of the things we do in education is we bring the parent in as a partner, and let's have parenting classes. You know, I'll never forget, I was watching a movie one time, this Parenthood, and the young man who had been abused by his father looked at his one mother and said, you know, in the state of California, you have to have a license to shoot something. You have to have a license to drive a car. But any fool can be a father. And it really struck me that one of the most important things we do, the only training I had in being a parent was watching other parents be a parent and instinctively loving my children. I think having parenting classes would be very helpful.
The challenge, of course, is it's like the PTA parent-teacher conferences. The only parents who, generally speaking, the only parents who show up are those who are already involved in their child's life and education intensely. So I used to be part of a Parents as Teachers training program through Teen Moms program, and eventually what we found was that, you know, if they don't have the buy-in, the carrot doesn't work very well.
Yeah. Let's talk environment for a couple of minutes here. And I was going to start with Gen X until we just reported this weekend about the extraordinary problems that our sewer plants had during Hurricane Florence. That it turns out, and who knew, I didn't know, that almost all of our sewer plants up and down the Cape Fear River are extremely vulnerable to flooding, and that when they get flooded out, they dump millions of gallons of raw sewage into the river. There's a fish kill that's so bad on the lower Cape Fear right now that a biologist at UNC Wilmington said, you probably shouldn't eat the fish down here, but it wouldn't matter anyway because they're all dead. There's no fish to catch. What do we do? Clearly, the infrastructure of our sewage treatment plants is not up to dealing with what a lot of people say is the new normal. So where do we go from there?
Well, first of all, I think we have to recognize the fact that this was a major disaster, a natural disaster. It's not something that happens regularly. And I understand that we had a similar situation 2 years ago, but since, you know, we had Fran in '96 and we had Floyd in '99, and then we went 17 years, and now we've had 2 in a row again. The other thing I think we have to acknowledge is that, we have 2 problems, 2 basic concerns about water quality. One is the forever chemicals, the man-made chemicals that cannot be absorbed into our ecosystem, are with us forever. We have to figure out how to keep them out of our water supply, and if we can't keep them out, how we can get them out. When we're talking about waste material, it's a different subject because it has a rather short-lived effect on the ecosystem, because organic material is eventually part of the ecosystem and absorbed back into the ecosystem. You know, we not only, in the lower Cape Fear, not only had the problem with the sewage overflow into the rivers from our municipal systems, but we also had the flushing from the swamp areas. There are huge areas of swamp in southeastern North Carolina, and that's brackish, dead water. It has very little oxygen content. And I heard the DEQ director speaking about the fact that that probably has a lot to do with the fish kill, because there's very little oxygen content. That has to get flushed through, but that's a natural process. We're not going to stop hurricanes, and we are going to have floods, and so there are some natural consequences from that we'll never be able to prevent. What are the mitigating things we can do to mitigate? I think in terms of water quality, Tim, we have to be focusing on the forever chemicals, and the organics are not as high a priority because they don't have a long-term effect.
Do you agree, Bill?
I tell you what you don't do. You don't sit there and label the mouth of the Cape Fear River from the mouth of from northeast Cape Fear River to the Atlantic Ocean, a swamp, so you put more nutrients in the water. I mean, it's disingenuous. It's just a flat out lie. There's no way that a 50-foot channel in a mile-wide river can be characterized as a swamp. And thank goodness the EPA said, no, North Carolina, you're not going to do that anymore. You don't sit there and allow or cut half the DEQ budget in a time when you've got all these chemicals and problems dealing with your water. And one thing that we've got to start doing is we've got to start recognizing that we can't pick and choose science. It is insane for us to have a law that says that I can't consider in coastal regulation and water quality any study that says climate change is real. Now, I don't care if climate change is man-made or a once every 10,000 year occurrence. There is definitely something going on that's raising the temperature and the water levels in this country and in the world. And if we don't accept that fact, we can't start planning. So we've got to get our heads out of the sand and start talking to one another and start looking at the science and planning accordingly. I watched the 60 Minutes show where they interviewed the director of water management in Amsterdam. And what they have done, and President Eisenhower did this, he invested heavily in infrastructure. And what they've done there, they live 8 feet below sea level, and they have storms there that are 150 miles an hour in the North Sea. But what they've done, for example, they put this huge parking lot that runs parallel to their coast. People, community, park in there. But when there's a giant storm comes and they have to divert water, they exit the cars and it becomes a sewage system, a storm sewer system. You know, there are lots of things we could do with our infrastructure that would improve the situation and not allow all this dumping and would not allow the massive damage that's done to people's lives if we would prepare for it. And we've got to get better at preparing for it.
Now, there are, as regards Gen X and the whole PFAS family of chemicals, and let's not forget 1,4-dioxane.
And C8 now.
C8, it turns out, is in the bloodstream of a lot of the people who lived around the Chemours plant. Two approaches here. Number one is that we prevent industry from dumping dangerous man-made chemicals that are going to persist in the environment. Or number two, we invest in our water treatment plants and we take that stuff out of there. Both New Hanover and Brunswick counties have decided they're not going to wait for the state to decide that it's going to prohibit the dumping and clean up the resource. They're spending, well, New Hanover is spending, I think it's $50 million, and Brunswick is spending $100 million to upfit their water treatment plants to remove things like Gen X and 1,4-dioxane. What should we be doing about that? What should a place like Fayetteville be doing? Because we've got that stuff in our water too.
Well, we do. We're not taking the 1,4-dioxane out, which is coming from apparently a manufacturing facility up in Asheboro where they do packaging, I think, for bottles of water, if I recall.
Bottles of water and pet food.
And I have to tell you, as much as I am concerned about clean water, and I really am, I rarely drink bottled water because I know that it leaches the chemicals that we're talking about into this water. So, you know, one of the things we learned at the EPA hearing.
I'm glad you told me that.
One of the things we learned at the EPA hearing in August is that these are endemic in our world. You can't find any water in the world today that doesn't have these forever chemicals in it. So the real question is how to determine toxicity levels and what we can tolerate in our water supply. And that's something that the EPA is working on, and that's sort of a global issue that North Carolina by itself does not have the capacity, would not have the capacity to tackle. It's the responsibility of our government, of our state government, to be able to monitor and to be able to provide that information, and also to provide the regulations for the companies that are operating within our state. I think that the answer is probably both of those, Tim. But the important thing is that we, you know, there are a finite number of possibilities when you try to track back the stream of chemicals that are coming into our water supply. So I think we have to do a better job of understanding that, so that we don't get caught like we did with Gen X, with a long-term problem that could have been a short-term problem if we'd been on our case a little sooner. But the good news out of Gen X, as you know, is that they have installed a $100 million facility to their invested $100 million in their facility, and that problem is resolving itself largely.
But the bad news is that PFAS chemicals are being found in Jordan Lake as well.
Everywhere.
Among other places.
And that's what the EPA said and told us, is that we've got to do the long-term, short-term studies globally across the country and really across the world that allow us to determine what toxic levels are and what we can tolerate. If we wanted to today, there's no way we could remove them all from our environment. So we have to understand better where we have to go from here.
But should we spend the money to remove them from our drinking water?
Right.
That's the question that government needs to face.
One of the questions I ask about the investments that are being made down in Brunswick County is, now that we know that the Chemours plant is removing over 90%, I think over 90, maybe 99% of what they were discharging.
They say it will be 99%
Yeah.
once that new equipment is installed.
Will.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's very close to that now. They're removing a very high percentage right now, and the levels around the entire area are dropping.
You know when we should have been concerned and aware that something was going on, and this is common sense. I remember when my parents would send me to borrow a lawnmower, and I'd go mow our grass with it if our lawnmower was broken. The neighbor's lawnmower. They say, "Son, clean it, sharpen the blades, put gas in it, and return it better than what you found it."
Mm-hmm.
Why aren't our good corporate citizens doing the exact same thing with our water? Water is a public trust. But more than that, there should have been a big red flag go up when DuPont, who had operated as DuPont all those years, all of a sudden changed the name to Chemours. And I'll tell you why they did that. Because they knew one day this was going to be exposed.
It's a lawyer thing, right?
It's a lawyer thing. And they knew it was going to be exposed. And so they created a lesser corporation that can declare bankruptcy, and the taxpayers are stuck with the bill.
I don't disagree with you, Billy. I absolutely think that's what's happened.
Let's go
If I
ahead.
could just real briefly, I'm curious if Republicans retain control of the House, if Democrats gain more power in this election, for both of you, what would be the single most important initiative that you believe could come out of the General Assembly in the next term on these issues, on these environmental issues that we're talking about?
I've been going first.
I'll answer that very simply: clean it up, and put more and have more accountability
For industry or
for all of us. I mean, our water is a public trust, and we must treat it as such a special commodity that it is. Growth follows water. If you look at all your major cities, they all around water. It is essential. Wars are going to be fought over water in the next 50 years.
Mm-hmm.
We have an abundance of it in this area. We are blessed with it. As our Lord told us, of that much is given, much is required. We have a sacred responsibility to treat that as a special commodity that it is. And if we do and we manage it, we will grow, because water is going to be a scarce commodity.
So to answer your question, I think that what we have to do as a state legislature is we have to invest in the ability to test and monitor. That's what we have to do, because that's what the EP needs. They need that information. We're not going to solve the problem in North Carolina, because it's not a North Carolina problem. It's also a North Carolina problem. That's our responsibility, to know what's going on, so that we can do the studies, so that we understand what's in our future and how we can mitigate those things for the future.
Really quickly, because we're starting to run out of time here, I want to talk about another urban-rural divide in North Carolina, and that's our economy. Our urban economy across this state is booming. our rural economy is still in the ditch. How do we level out our economy and bring a little more prosperity to our rural counties?
Well, it's a challenge for a lot of reasons. One is that we have a bit of a brain drain because those of our family members who grew up in rural areas and poor areas go to the cities and the urban areas, you know, to find employment, and that's in their field. Our own children are all in North Carolina, all three of our daughters, but they did not come back to Cumberland County and Fayetteville because the jobs they were trained to do don't exist here, and they're all in the Triangle area because that's where the jobs are. I think the big challenge is to find what industries can do well in the urban areas, and it's interesting actually that when the tobacco industry went away, and we all understand why that happened, the agricultural industry that replaced that in eastern and rural North Carolina was the hog industry, the swine industry. And so now when we talk about you know, some of the downsides of that, we have to understand that if we impact that community, then what do we do now to bring income? And you know, we have the additional challenge now of the devastation with Florence in that part of the state, and that's really a huge problem. And I have a feeling that we're going to have such a long recovery period from that, that we're going to have to be focusing on some real basics of recovery and for the future. You know, the counties like Pender County, where, you know, over 25% of the entire area of the county was inundated in floodwaters, and parts still are. Their infrastructure, their public buildings, you know, they still have families that in an urban area we can absorb. When we had the inundations down in Robinson County 2 years ago, and now we've got hotels and we can put people up in hotels, provide temporary housing. They don't have that kind of infrastructure. So they're having to leave the county, leave their jobs if their jobs still exist, and really we're going to have challenges. But with challenges come opportunities. So sometimes when there's a clearing out, there's an opportunity for other things to come in. But Tim, I think this is a challenge. Certainly, it's not just a challenge in North Carolina. We know it's a challenge across the country. It's kind of the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. I understand that the Triangle area has the largest concentration of MDs and PhDs of any place in the country, and they just keep coming. But you know what the good side is that we're beginning to see some outflow from that, even here in Cumberland County, because you can only absorb so much and provide so much infrastructure quickly in those large urban areas, and eventually there is outflow, and I think we're beginning to see that.
All you got to do is build a ballpark,
Yeah.
and they will
If
come.
you build it.
That's right, Billy.
I'm going to give you an example of two brilliant leaders, one a Republican, one a Democrat, President Eisenhower and Terry Sanford. The reason there's so much growth in those 7-8 counties around the Research Triangle Park and around Charlotte is because there is a balance. You've got to have a good, reasonable tax rate, but at the same time, you've got to provide the infrastructure for business to thrive. We're in the midst of a new era of business, the information age. Thank goodness that Luther Hodges and Terry Sanford had the wisdom to see the beginning of that and took a piece of farmland in Chatham County and said, we're going to have a Research Triangle Park. We're going to have a community college system. Thank God President Eisenhower had the wisdom and the political strength to create interstate commerce, or the interstate highway. When you talk about building a ball field, you're partially right. We don't build ball fields. What we do is we build the ability and the infrastructure that's going to be needed for this information age. And what a wonderful opportunity for our farmers. Rather than having to go to a middle person with silos and store their grain and have to pay the price that the middle person wants, with the information age, we can set up the infrastructure with 5G. You know, I think it's 5G, but it's 5 something. Put that out into the rural areas and let the farmers deal directly with open markets in Europe and in Asia. Mm-hmm. They can make enormous profits that way. If we take advantage of what is coming, if we have the wisdom and the farsightedness to prepare for the future and help the rural areas do that, they will grow. If we don't put that infrastructure in there, if we don't take care of our water, they won't. It's just that simple. And what we've got to do is we've got to recognize that and start planning. And it's so essential. When I was there in the 90s, I served under a Democratic speaker and a Republican speaker, both excellent speakers. I know that sounds crazy, but it's true, they were. And the reason they were, they had a different philosophy of government, they had a different philosophy of how to get things done, but they were inclusive. And they used the ideas, like Dan used the ideas of the Republicans. He had Republican chairmen on committees. Brubaker worked me to death. And I even stood on my desk one time with him, but he worked me to death because he used my talents. We are not using the collective wisdom of all these wonderful members of the General Assembly to solve these problems. Yeah, and that's a shame because the ability to solve these problems are there if we would just start talking to one another. And what my fervent hope and prayer is that we will start doing some long-range planning. That's what's going to get us where we need to be is looking 20 years down the road and saying where's this world going and where can we position North Carolina to take advantage of it.
To your points, Cumberland County and Fayetteville has felt left behind for decades. I think that is changing, but from your position in Raleigh, representing a large chunk of Fayetteville, what can the General Assembly do? What can you do as a lawmaker to make to bring jobs, good paying jobs, to our community, to get us in a position where we are able to? You can't have an RTP in every county across the state, and I don't see that on our future in Cumberland County. But how do we fully?
Why not?
Is it possible? I mean,
well, I think Billy's right.
What would that take to get us to that? Because I think that people in this community want to see. We see, the Amazons and the tech and the bio and everything happening. The rooms to go right up north of Cumberland County. Why are we not getting that here? And what can we do to change that?
Well, I think the rooms to go is a different situation. It had to do with being able to aggregate that kind of property into one place, and that was sort of a unique situation. But Billy's right about infrastructure. There's no question about it. And I have to tell you that the fact that we're no longer rating the transportation funds to pay the bills, and that we're using that money to build roads and bridges and infrastructure that's needed for transportation, I see it in our community. I think everyone sees it in our community. We've had a huge expansion of the ability to
outer loop.
Yeah, the outer loop, the bypass route, and even the Sanford bypass, which is just up the road, that makes it, the RTP area accessible for folks who live here. So I think we're beginning to see the benefits of that, of good fiscal management, quite frankly, instead of just handing out political favors for infrastructure that we build. But the other thing is, we have to look at what we're offering in terms of education in our university system as well. RTP didn't just happen to locate in the Triangle area. They located there because there were 3 major research universities there. And so I think that we're seeing for our local universities, certainly Fayetteville State, Fayetteville Tech, as well as Methodist, now that it's a university, bringing additional programs into our community that we haven't seen before. We're building programs that will be able to provide the people. One of the comments we always get when we're trying to attract industry to this area is that we don't have a job-ready workforce. We don't have people trained and ready for the jobs. There's no point in someone deciding to operate a business here if they can't hire people from this area to work in it. We were talking earlier before we started the show about the fact that I'm from Indiana, and in the county next to where I grew up, Elkhart, Indiana, they build 80% of the RVs and mobile homes in the country. Well, at one time, about a decade ago, they tried to diversify that geographically, and some of the manufacturers tried to move to the West Coast and Texas, but they all ended up coming back because the people who know how to do those jobs all live there, and the industries that support them and those that feed into them, they're all there. So it's a long-term project to be able to change sort of the trajectory of your community. But I think a lot of it here, we're getting the infrastructure, we're seeing it through DOT, but we've got to be able to look at our education system as well, and how we can expand that to produce the job-ready workforce.
So you got to come in.
I think that
we agree.
We agree. But I think Linda, by her answer, agrees that we've got to have world-class schools. We've got to have them.
Absolutely.
But here's something, again, where we've got to start looking 20 years down the road. Think of this. We get our major revenue for building roads through the gas tax. Well, guess what's coming? And it's coming. Cars are getting better and better gas mileage, which means they're consuming less and less gas. In the next 10 years, you're going to see electric cars like there's nobody's business. What is going to happen is you're going to have a shortage of revenue. That means you're not going to have the ability to build these roads and to maintain them unless we start talking to each other and we come up with solutions to that complicated problem. And it's coming. And we've got to start seeing these things coming before they hit us in the face and be proactive rather than reactive. And if we will do that, we will prosper. I refuse to believe that Fayetteville cannot be a major economic hub. I refuse to believe it. We've got Fort Bragg there. We've got wonderful people. We've got great workers. We've got Fayetteville Tech. We've got to sell this community. And then in addition to that, we've got to reinvest in education, reinvest in our infrastructure, and recruit these industries.
Do you think that from Raleigh we're selling ourselves, from your perspective as you've been up there for 3 years now, do you see that that Fayetteville is doing a good, and Cumberland County is doing a good job selling ourselves to the leaders in Raleigh?
To the leaders in Raleigh, yes, but I think we can do a better job of selling ourselves to industry. And I think we do that. My dad told me, and it's so true, he said, son, be well-rounded. Learn to play, hunt, fish, play tennis, because most decisions are made not in a boardroom. They're made in a duck line. They're made on the golf course. It's all interpersonal. Why aren't we going to the CEOs of these companies and meeting them face to face rather than sending them a brochure? They get 500 of those brochures a day. Why aren't we insisting to sit in their boardroom and sell Cumberland County in the boardroom? And I've asked the mayor, I've asked numerous people on economic development, let's go sit in the president's office until he sees us. We've got something extraordinary here, and that is that we've got the finest military force in the world, and those men and women are extraordinary, and we've got a wonderful community here, and we can sell this community to those businesses. It's a great place to live. It's a great place to work. We need to fix our schools and get them up to snuff. We need to work on our infrastructure. But golly, the people of this community are outstanding. And with Fort Bragg and those wonderful veterans, we can sell this place to anyone.
Well, I don't disagree with you about that. We're a military family when we came here on our 2-year tour in 1980 as well, and we've stayed for 38 years to raise our family and make this our community. And there are a lot of military families that do that, and they find job opportunities here. But you know, it's a process to get from where we are to down the road to where RTP is. I mean, you know, we have it's a major, I don't want to say a hurdle because it's really a progression, but we have to be determined and we have to be intentional about it.
Amen.
So I think it absolutely, you know, when we're talking about recruiting, and I understand, you know, the frustration we have with recruiting. We have people working on it. We have competent people working on it. The biggest obstacle is our job-ready workforce, and whether or not the skills that we're training people for in this community are the skills that industry is looking for when they locate here. You know, we're seeing coming in our community now companies that'll employ 50, 100, 150 people, but that's probably what we can realistically expect at this point in terms of good jobs or jobs that require special training and abilities, because that's what our labor force is able to provide. And when we talk about a company coming in and bringing a workforce with them or recruiting a workforce from other places, then we've got to be talking about the quality of life issues that we're working so hard on here in our community. And I think we're making a lot of progress in that area.
The jobs of the future are not going to be a one-time job. We're going to be, my grandchildren are going to probably work 4 or 5 different jobs over the course of their career, because as they get in one job, it's going to become obsolete. We are in an unprecedented age, and what I think Fort Bragg offers here is one of the things that the Marines say: adapt, improvise, and overcome. In this new age we're entering, our children are going to have to do that very thing. They're going to have to be flexible and can change and be trained in a moment's notice. And that's what Fort Bragg does. We are uniquely positioned for this information age if we'll take advantage of it.
If I may ask a question from another one of our viewers. He asked about what kind of tax breaks can he expect for the working class in North Carolina, or do you think that that the legislature or you would support raising taxes?
I support raising taxes to the 2015 level. We're really not raising it for the education, and I believe people will go along with that. But I believe it ought to be the burden of that ought to go on businesses and on folks that make over $200,000, $300,000 a year. I don't believe that the working people, they're taxed enough. I'll tell you how they're taxed. What you don't realize is that when cutting these taxes, what's happened over the last 8 years is the way that they've got revenue by cutting the taxes is they've added an extraordinary number of fees onto services and stuff that affect everyday common people more so than folks that make a larger income. Those fees are very repressive to a middle class, lower middle class family. And I think it's an unfair tax. You can call it a fee all you want, it's a tax. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of a hidden tax. And it's really not it's somewhat disingenuous.
And there's rising sales taxes as well.
Exactly. And I think that the taxes ought to be on, in the industry and stuff, they're the ones that use the infrastructure the most. But again, looking down the road, we're going to have to really assess how we do business as a state because things are going to change so quick. The first thing we got to tackle is the gas tax because as consumption shrinks, so will the revenue.
I think we've made a lot of progress in the last decade in North Carolina. We have become more attractive to businesses that are bringing jobs here because we've cut our top income tax rate for personal income taxes from 7.75 just a decade ago to now in the coming year will be 5.25%. We've also lowered our corporate tax rate. We cut off two-thirds. We now have instead of having the highest income tax rates for both corporate and personal in the Southeast, we have the lowest personal income tax rates in the Southeast, and we have the lowest corporate income taxes in the country. And I think that's good, but I also think we don't need to continue on that path, I'll be honest with you. I think we're in a pretty good place. It's 5.25 is the across the board individual income tax for the coming year, and corporate income tax will be 2.5%. But that's something that in recovering from our recession, we had to overcome the fact that we had these high tax rates and that we went into a recession with the highest tax rates and a very small cushion or a rainy day fund. And what we've been able to do is right that ship and get ourselves on a firm fiscal footing now. The fact that we were able to build a $2 billion rainy day fund is the only reason now that we're able to do what we are in terms of recovering from these hurricanes. If we were in the same position we had been a decade ago with only 100 or 200 million in our rainy day fund, we would not be able to provide the assistance that we are, not only to recover but also to build resiliency for the future. I think we're in good shape fiscally in this state.
I do too. But at the same time, if you look at growth, it is a combination that all of life, and the older I get, the more I realize that all of life is a balance. And it's not just taxes. I mean, if it was just taxes, the rural area would be just booming. It is a combination. We've got the climate in the beautiful state. It's a combination of great climate to live in. But you've got to have a great education system because the first thing that a new couple moving into a community asks for is where's the best schools. You've got to have good infrastructure. Look at where the growth is. Yes, the taxes have come down, and we are growing, but where are we growing? We're growing where we as a government invested in the universities, invested in the Research Triangle Park, and Hugh McCall investing in the banking system. That made it possible to grow. And so if we do this in a balanced way, I think we will flourish. And I give the Republicans complete credit that what they've given us is a golden opportunity here. They have cut so much that we are bare bone. And if we go in there disciplined now and reinvest in the things that are going to make us grow, and this is what's frustrating me right now, is I see all this wonderful opportunity to really do some wonderful things with our infrastructure, with our education. But everybody just wants to stop with the taxes. It's a balance. And if we will go back and put meaningful meat on the bones, if we will rebuild our schools, if we will recommit to our universities, if we will put the infrastructure out into the rural area and the mountains, then we will see unprecedented growth. But it's a combination of those things that make us grow.
Very good. Well, we're about out of time now. Obviously, the two of you care deeply about our community and our state, and you're passionate about these issues, and we appreciate you coming here to share your views on them, and I hope that folks watching have learned something about each of you, and perhaps can make a more informed decision on November 6th.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's been fun, and thanks to everybody who's been watching as well.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you, Tim.
Linda, thank you.
Thank you,
That was
Billy.
a great debate. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.